April 14th, 2023, 2:14 in the morning. A text message is sent from a burner phone in just this incredibly cheap motel in West Asheville, North Carolina. And it just reads, quote, "I'm so scared, embarrassed, alone. I keep asking myself, WTF is wrong with me? I'm addicted to abuse," unquote.
Man, yeah, that is just, it's heavy right from the start.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. And today, I mean, we are not looking at some polished memoir. We aren't dissecting one of those neatly packaged autobiographies where a survivor looks back on their trauma with like perfect 10-year hindsight.
Yeah.
We actually have our hands on something incredibly rare today.
Right, because we have a massive, completely unedited archive of raw, real-time chat logs.
Yeah.
And these span 3 entire years, right? From April 2023 all the way to March 2026.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's unpack this because the distinction between a retrospective memoir and these primary source logs is just, it's huge.
Oh, absolutely vital. I mean, a memoir is a story told from the safety of the finish line. You know how it ends. But these logs, they are a life in absolute freefall. They're these messy, urgent, desperate transmissions sent from the absolute center of a psychological storm.
Right.
Like, we are reading the exact words a man typed while sitting on a motel bed, literally terrified the police were going to kick his door in.
Yeah, and we're reading these frantic messages sent from mountain trails, and vulnerable confessions typed out on his friends' couches. It's just this unfiltered map of survival.
What's fascinating here is how these logs provide a neurological map of what it actually takes to break a trauma bond. It completely shatters our cultural mythology about leaving an abusive relationship.
For sure. Because we talk about it in society as if it's this simple binary physical act, right?
Right, like you just pack a bag, walk out the door, the music swells, and you're free.
Exactly. The physical escape is treated as the whole job. It's the most common, just insidious question people ask.
Yeah.
Why didn't they just leave?
Ugh, I hate that question.
Right. I want you, the person listening to this right now, to really examine what you picture when you hear the phrase escaping domestic abuse. Because Hollywood totally conditions us to imagine a single dramatic exit, the slammed door in the pouring rain, the immediate sense of liberation.
But Chad's story strips all that illusion away completely. Because leaving is not an event, it's an exhausting, cyclical reality.
Yeah.
It's defined by staggering cognitive dissonance, profound grief, and this agonizingly slow process of rebuilding a shattered sense of self-worth.
So the physical escape is basically just the prologue.
Exactly. The psychological escape is the actual war, and the gravity of that war is immense.
So to understand the healing, we really have to start right in the middle of the crisis. Before we get to the recovery, we have to understand the specific, suffocating mechanics of the trap Chad is trying to break out of.
Right, the baseline.
Yeah, the baseline. So we're jumping into the timeline in April 2023. Chad is hiding out. He literally describes himself in the logs as being holed up in, quote, the skeeziest hotel in West Asheville, North Carolina.
And he's down there because he just drove down to drop a friend off, right?
Yeah, his friend Zach. He was dropping Zach off to hike a section of the Appalachian Trail, and while he's sitting in that motel room, his life back home in Maine has just violently exploded.
And the inciting incident that puts him in this motel room is deeply disturbing. I mean, it perfectly illustrates the... Yeah. But the catalyst, like this specific event that finally breaks the dam, happens right before he leaves for North Carolina. They go for a hike, which is supposed to be this grounding activity for them. But instead, a massive argument breaks out.
Right, and Chad does what you were supposed to do when a conflict escalates, right? He removes himself.
Exactly. He goes to his sister's house to cool off, to de-escalate the situation. But when he eventually goes back to the house they share, his partner is heavily intoxicated. She gets naked, demands sex, and completely ignores his vocal, explicit lack of consent.
Yeah, and we need to be clear here.
Right, Chad states clearly in his messages that he said no. He tells her it's messed up. He tries to stop it. And she just simply ignores him.
It's assault.
It is. Hours later, Chad is sitting in the aftermath, so fundamentally confused and horrified by what just happened that he reaches out for professional guidance. He actually calls the Maine domestic violence hotline. And we really have to pause and look at the psychological weight of that phone call because the advocate on the other end of the line listens to his account and tells him point blank, what happened to you is considered sexual assault.
Wow.
And that external validation is a critical intervention,
Yeah.
When you are deeply embedded in a toxic dynamic, your abuser is constantly rewriting the narrative to make you the instigator.
Yeah, constantly gaslighting you.
Exactly. So having an objective, trained, professional label the behavior correctly, that's often the very first crack in the abuser's reality distortion field.
And it's a massive paradigm shift,
Yeah.
especially for a male victim who carries all this societal baggage of being told men cannot be assaulted in this manner. It completely shatters his worldview. But here's the part of the narrative that is truly terrifying. This is where the institutional gaslighting really kicks in.
Oh, the legal piece?
Yeah, right. Chad processes this realization. He decides he cannot stay, so he starts packing his belongings to move out the next morning while his partner is at work. But she comes home unexpectedly, sees him packing his bags, and immediately realizes she's losing control of her target.
So she flips the script.
She flips the script completely. She calls the police, and she falsely claims that Chad is destroying the house.
Which brings us to the legal weaponization. She doesn't just call the police. She goes and files a protection from abuse, order a PFA against him.
I mean, let's look at the absolute absurdity of this legal mechanism being used as a weapon. How does someone process being the victim of assault only to be legally branded the abuser hours later? A PFA is designed to be this vital, life-saving shield for vulnerable people in immediate danger, but she uses the shield as a sword to get an illegal eviction.
Right. She's using the court system to punish him for leaving.
How does an abuser even pull that off?
Well, it exploits the very necessary speed of the system. PFA orders are often granted ex parte, which means the judge issues a temporary order based solely on the affidavit of the person filing it before the accused ever even has a chance to testify or present evidence.
Wow. So they don't even hear his side at all.
Right. The system errs on the side of caution to prevent violence, which makes sense in theory, but abusers know this. They know that if they can file first, they can legally brand their victim as the aggressor. They can banish their victim from their own home, separate them from their belongings, and force them into this defensive legal posture that costs thousands of dollars to unravel.
Which leaves Chad in that Asheville motel room. I mean, think about the timeline. You are the victim of a sexual assault on a Monday night. By Tuesday afternoon, the police have handed you paperwork, legally branding you as the abuser. You've been forced out of your own home in what Chad's lawyer later explicitly calls an, quote, illegal eviction.
And you're sitting in a sketchy motel hundreds of miles away, jumping at every single sound in the hallway.
Yeah, terrified that if you text your friends or try to get your tools back, you'll be arrested for violating a court order. The psychological whiplash is just incomprehensible.
And it creates an immediate crisis of identity. If you look at his chats with his friends during this specific week, specifically two friends named Danielle and April, you can watch him internalizing the abuser's narrative.
Yes, he is absorbing the shame that actually belongs to her.
Exactly. Like the message we read at the top of the show. He writes to April, "I'm so scared, embarrassed, alone." He tells Danielle his self-confidence is completely obliterated. He says he feels stupid.
He types out, WTF is wrong with me. He's actively taking the blame for her actions. He's searching his own behavior to figure out how he caused her to assault him and then legally evict him.
Which is the ultimate sickening victory for an abuser.
Right.
They don't just want to punish you, they want you to author your own guilt. They want you to believe that the punishment is righteous and deserved.
Yeah, that is so dark.
It is. But this desperate searching for what is wrong with me actually leads Chad to arguably the most crucial psychological breakthrough he makes in the entire 2023 archive.
Okay, tell me about that.
So in late April, while he's reeling from the PFA, he starts tracing the roots of his tolerance for this treatment. He connects his partner's abuse directly back to his mother. He messages Danielle and explains that his mother treated him the exact same way his entire life.
Wow.
And he has this horrifying epiphany that it took him 36 years to realize how malicious his mother's treatment was. I mean, he hasn't spoken to her in 8 years, yet the programming remains completely intact.
This is such a profound light bulb moment. Let's use an analogy to understand what's happening in his brain here. It's basically as if Chad's emotional brain is running on a corrupted operating system.
I like that, yeah.
Because when you're an infant and a child, your primary caregivers are your programmers, right? They write your original source code for what love, safety, and attachment are supposed to look like. So because his original blueprint with his mother was fundamentally toxic, unpredictable, and cruel abuse became his normalized baseline.
Exactly.
So decades later, when this partner begins treating him terribly, his internal threat detection system doesn't sound the alarm. The corrupted software looks at the manipulation, the screaming, the sudden affection, and says, oh, I recognize this. This is familiar. This is what love feels like.
Yeah, the psychological term for this is repetition compulsion.
Yeah.
And it's rooted really deeply in attachment theory. We subconsciously seek out familiar dynamics, even if they're totally destructive, because the brain actually prefers the devil it knows over the anxiety of the unknown. He was biologically primed to accept this treatment. He actually writes in the logs, quote, "Taking abuse is just too normalized in my head." And this realization reaches this terrifying crescendo in a message he sends to his best friend, Jeff. He's analyzing his own behavior, his own desperate desire to go back to the woman who just destroyed his life, and he types out, "I'm addicted to abuse."
I'm addicted to abuse. I mean,
Wow.
when you read those words on the screen, surrounded by the timestamps of 3 a.m., it just sits heavy in your chest. For Chad, that's not a metaphor. He's not using hyperbole. He is describing what feels like a literal chemical dependency.
He uses that terminology because neurologically, a trauma bond functions almost identically to substance addiction.
Really, like the exact same pathway.
Pretty much, yeah. The cycle of idealization and devaluation, that violent shifting from lovey and awesome to cruel and abusive, it hijacks the brain's reward centers. It's called intermittent reinforcement. During the abuse phase, the victim's brain is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. They are in pure survival mode. Then the abuser apologizes, or the honeymoon phase briefly returns, and the brain is hit with this massive, overwhelming rush of dopamine and oxytocin.
Wow.
Over time, the victim's nervous system literally becomes addicted to that biochemical roller coaster. The abuser becomes the only source of relief from the pain that the abuser is causing.
The abuser becomes the poison and the antidote.
Exactly.
Which brings us perfectly into the next phase of his journey, the withdrawal. Because we're moving from the logistics of the physical escape into the psychological warfare of staying gone, the cognitive dissonance, and the constant looming threat of relapse. Because once he's out of the house, the hardest part is actually just beginning.
Right. So we are looking closely at the logs spanning from roughly May to October of 2023. And on paper, Chad is taking all the correct practical steps. He hires a lawyer, he drops a $5,000 retainer to fight the false PFA and to try and establish a legal framework to retrieve his storing belongings, his tools, his camping gear, the assets he needs to live.
Yeah.
But if you read the text messages from this same era, they are agonizing. They are the textbook definition of cognitive dissonance. The logical brain and the emotional brain are completely cleaved in two. He writes to a friend, "I still feel like I want her to. It's so sick and it hurts."
I mean, think about the absolute chaos of that state of mind. He drops $5,000 money he desperately needs to legally protect himself from a woman who just weaponized the police against him. And simultaneously, he is texting his friend that he still loves her. From the outside, looking at it purely logically, it makes no sense. Why would you want to go back to the person holding the knife?
Right.
But psychologically, it makes perfect sense.
It does. And this raises the most misunderstood question in the study of domestic violence. Why do victims miss their abusers? Why does Chad say, "I love her and I can't turn it off," even while he's consciously documenting in his logs that she exhibits borderline personality traits and that she is maliciously withholding his property purely to exert control over him?
And he actually answers this himself, right, in this deeply philosophical chat with his friend Jennifer Manchester. He's trying to explain his own broken heart to her, and he writes, quote, "I have 6 years of memories of her not acting that way. It's hard to turn them off," unquote. And in a later message, he expands on it. He says, "I think I want the good things, the dream. When I think about the bad things, I remember why I am where I am."
Yeah. He is mourning an illusion. He is grieving the person he thought she was. He's mourning the mask she wore during those 6 years before the illusion completely shattered. And grieving an illusion is a uniquely agonizing process because there is absolutely no closure.
Right, because it's not like a normal breakup.
Exactly. When a loved one passes away, you mourn the loss of a real person. But when a trauma bond breaks, you aren't just mourning the loss of a relationship. You are mourning the terrifying realization that your reality was fabricated. You are mourning the fact that the person you loved never actually existed.
Wow. And what makes this cognitive dissonance so dangerous is that while he is trying to process this world-shattering grief, she is actively terrorizing him. Like, she doesn't just file the PFA and let him walk away. The logs detail this incredibly aggressive, sustained campaign of isolation and sabotage. She is actively trying to break his grip on reality.
Oh, the tactics are methodical. She breaks into his digital life. She hacks his Facebook Messenger. She breaches his Gmail account. She reads his private conversations with his support network, takes screenshots, and then weaponizes them.
The violation of that is just staggering to me. I mean, your digital footprint is your sanctuary, especially when you isolate it in a motel room. It's your only connection to the outside world. And she violates it. But she goes further than just spying. She specifically targets his friend Danielle.
Yeah, that part is wild.
Right. She takes those hacked screenshots, manipulates the context, and sends them to Danielle to make it look like Chad is a stalker. She is actively trying to turn one of his oldest, safest friends against him. She even creates a fake Snapchat profile using his name to impersonate him. It's a full-scale assault on his reputation and his support system.
It is a totally calculated strategy to ensure he remains isolated. Because if she can burn his bridges, he has nowhere to go but back to her. And the stalking isn't just digital either, right? It bleeds into the physical world.
Yeah, the audacity of this one specific physical incident in the logs just blew my mind. Chad is out one day, simply trying to exist, running an errand. He's sitting in his vehicle. His ex, the woman who took out a legal protection order claiming she was terrified of him, literally pulls up beside his car. She gets out of her vehicle, walks up to his, opens his car door uninvited, and tries to force a physical hug on him.
I mean, that is boundary violation as a form of absolute dominance. Let's analyze the psychology of that car door opening.
Please do, because it's insane.
By forcing physical contact while holding a legal order over his head, she is demonstrating ultimate power. She is basically showing him, you cannot escape me. I have access to your digital life, I can manipulate your friendships, and I can invade your physical space whenever I choose.
And if he pushes her away.
Exactly. If he reacts negatively to her forcing a hug on him, she can just call the police and say he violated the PFA.
All right.
It is an impossible checkmate scenario designed specifically to induce panic.
And the sheer bone-deep exhaustion of living under that constant, unpredictable threat, it's so palpable in the logs. You see Chad's messages slow down. The tone shifts from frantic to just hollowed out. He describes having his spirit broken. He's lost his home, his tools, his entire daily routine, and his fundamental sense of what is real. He tells a friend he feels, quote, mostly dead inside. He's a shell.
And when a person's spirit is, quote unquote, mostly dead inside, the brain basically has to make a binary choice. You either shut down entirely and succumb to the depression, or you find a lifeline. The biological imperative to survive eventually has to kick in. And for Chad, that lifeline was psychology.
Right.
He decides that if his mind has been broken by psychological warfare, he has to use psychological frameworks to rebuild it.
And this brings us to the actual mechanics of his recovery, which is amazing. Having hit the absolute bottom, Chad actively starts hunting for practical tools. In this highly analytical chat with his friend Jennifer Manchester, Chad explicitly brings up Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Right. And for listeners who might need a quick refresher on that, Abraham Maslow was a psychologist who proposed that human motivation is based on fulfilling a series of hierarchical needs, usually depicted as a pyramid.
Right, the pyramid.
Yeah. At the very top of the pyramid is self-actualization. The desire to become the most that one can be, to fulfill your ultimate potential, engage in deep creativity, find moral purpose, all that. But Maslow's core theory is that you cannot sustainably reach the top of the pyramid if the bottom levels are crumbling.
You can't paint a masterpiece if you're starving.
Exactly. The very bottom level is physiological needs: air, water, food, shelter, sleep. The next level up is safety needs: personal security, employment, resources, health, and property.
So Chad messages Jennifer and tells her that he has sat down and made a, quote, rebuilding my life list. And he notes, quote, the things on it are pretty much all in that orange section. He's referring to a specific diagram of the pyramid where the bottom foundational layers, the physiological and safety needs, are colored orange.
And that level of self-awareness is just extraordinary for someone in the middle of complex trauma. Because when your life blows up, the instinct is often to try to fix everything simultaneously. People try to immediately find a new perfect relationship or launch a new career or jump straight into self-actualization just to prove to their abuser that they are thriving.
Right, like, look how well I'm doing without you.
Exactly. But Chad realizes the futility of that. He looks at his reality and says, no, I am homeless. My tools have been stolen, so my livelihood is compromised. I'm operating under a false legal threat. My nervous system is absolutely fried. He realizes he has to secure the orange section first. He has to establish safe shelter, ensure bodily autonomy, and physically downregulate his amygdala before he can even think about moving up the pyramid.
And how does he secure that orange section? He drives. He essentially adopts a nomadic van life existence. Over the course of just a couple of months, the logs show him logging over 6,000 miles, driving his vehicle up and down the east coast of the United States.
He turns to nature, basically using it as both meditation and medicine. And the geographical data points in the chat logs are expensive here. We track him hiking through Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. We see him in the Grayson Highlands navigating the wild ponies and those rocky outcrops.
Yeah, and then later he moves north, disappearing into the 100-mile wilderness in Maine, summiting the treacherous rock faces of the Bald Faces, and walking the rugged, isolated Cutler Coast. It's as if he is literally and figuratively walking it off.
Right.
Every single mile he drives on the highway, every mountain elevation he summits, is putting physical geographic distance between his body and the source of his abuse. But it is so much more than just running away. He tells Jennifer, quote, "Hiking makes me feel free." He writes at length about the profound solitude.
So let's examine the neurobiology of that solitude because it is the key to his physiological recovery.
Okay, lay it on me.
So his nervous system has been subjected to chronic, unpredictable threat for months. The digital hacking, the stalking, the legal abuse. His HPA axis, that's the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands, has been stuck in the on position, just flooding his body with stress hormones.
Look, exhausting.
Totally. And chronic cortisol actually shrinks the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain responsible for memory and emotional regulation, while simultaneously expanding the amygdala, which is the fear center. His brain physically changed.
Wow, physically changed.
Yes. But out in the deep woods of the 100-mile wilderness, the environment changes. There are no sudden, uninvited car door openings. There are no hacked emails popping up on a screen. There is only the trail, the weather, and his own repetitive physical exertion.
The simplicity of survival, putting one foot in front of the other.
Exactly. The repetitive bilateral movement of hiking functions similarly to EMDR therapy, eye movement desensitization, and reprocessing. It allows the left and right hemispheres of the brain to communicate, processing the trapped trauma. The absolute predictability of nature allows his amygdala to finally stop firing alarms every 10 seconds. His nervous system slowly begins to downregulate. The orange section of the pyramid starts to stabilize.
But Chad is incredibly pragmatic. He knows that hiking is regulating his body, but he also knows his operating system is still corrupted by the gaslighting and the childhood trauma. So he brings in professional tech support. Even while he is living a nomadic van life, hopping from cheap motels to remote campsites, he actively seeks out professional intervention.
Which takes a lot of effort when you're on the road.
It does. He signs up for the online therapy platform BetterHelp. He manages to secure 4 distinct therapy sessions right in the middle of all this chaos.
And pay close attention to why he tells his friends he needs therapy. He doesn't just say, "Oh, I'm sad." He admits to Jennifer that his self-confidence is so thoroughly decimated that he, quote, doesn't trust his own judgment anymore. That phrase is the absolute hallmark of severe gaslighting.
Yeah, because when an abuser constantly rewrites reality, looking you in the eye and telling you that you are the abuser, that you are crazy, that you wanted to be assaulted, your internal compass just shatters. You lose the ability to trust your own senses.
So therapy becomes his reality testing ground. He uses the therapist to bounce his perceptions off a neutral, clinically trained third party. He lays out the facts of the PFA, the hacking, the assault, and allows the therapist to confirm that he isn't the crazy one. It is the ultimate countermeasure to gaslighting. He is systematically untangling the cognitive distortion.
So solitude in the mountains heals the nervous system. Therapy begins to heal the mind. But human connection, that is what heals the heart. And we see a massive shift in his trajectory as he realizes he cannot survive in isolation forever. He's laid the foundation of the pyramid, but to move up, he has to rebuild his village.
And this transition is fascinating because it defies almost every societal expectation placed upon male victims of trauma.
Oh, totally. Society conditions men to suffer stoically. The patriarchal narrative demands that men hide their victimization, process their shame in complete silence, and project strength at all times.
But Chad rejects that entirely. He uses vulnerability as a superpower. He utterly refuses to suffer in silence. He actively, persistently reaches out to a wide network of people. The logs show deep, ongoing conversations with April, Zach, Pamela, Jennifer Manchester, Danielle, and a friend named Lee, who goes by Sure.
And look at the specific nature of these communications. He is radically transparent about his emotional state. He doesn't sugarcoat it at all. He tells his friends he is crying. He tells them he feels broken. In one particularly striking message, he simply texts, quote, "I need a hug."
Yeah.
I mean, I want us to really sit with that. I need a hug. How often do you see an adult man, specifically one who has just been stripped of his home and his dignity, texting his friends, asking for physical comfort? It is incredibly rare and is the key to his survival. He is explicitly demanding the emotional support he requires to survive. And by giving his friends the unvarnished truth, he gives them the opportunity to actually show up for him.
And one of the most beautiful and poignant examples of this mutual healing process happens with his friend Pamela. Chad eventually ends his nomadic van life and ends up staying with Pam in Bath, Maine. Now, Pam is navigating her own massive physical and emotional trauma. She had undergone open heart surgery earlier that year.
Wow, so you literally have two people with broken hearts, one biological, one psychological, living under the exact same roof.
It is a profound parallel. And Chad doesn't just use Pam's house as a place to hide. He doesn't just couch surf and wallow in his own misery. He actively integrates himself into her life as a contributor. He takes on heavy yard work that she cannot do while recovering from surgery. Furthermore, Pam is building a performance stage, and Chad uses his technical skills to help her wire the stage for sound and lighting.
I just love the metaphor of the stage wiring. Connecting the circuits, ensuring the energy flows correctly, lighting up a space for performance and joy. Why is this specific act of helping Pam so psychologically vital for Chad?
Because it provides the therapeutic value of being needed. For months, Chad's abuser had systematically told him he was worthless. She stripped him of his assets, his tools, his home, and his identity. She made him a defensive victim by stepping in as a capable, highly useful caretaker for Pam, who genuinely needs the physical and technical assistance. Chad is slowly restoring his own sense of agency. Every time he wires a circuit or clears the yard, he is proving to himself, I am useful. I am valuable. I have skills that can build things rather than just survive things.
It's reciprocal healing. She gives him shelter, he gives her capability. But Chad takes this newfound agency a step further. He doesn't just receive help, he starts paying it forward. And he does this almost immediately. The logs, heavily focused around February to April of 2024, are essentially a masterclass in peer support.
Yeah, we see Chad entering into incredibly deep, urgent conversations with his friend Lee. Lee is trapped in her own highly volatile, controlling relationship with a boyfriend named Noah.
And the descriptions of Lee's situation are terrifyingly familiar. She's pacing her house in fear. Noah's throwing massive, manipulative tantrums. At one point, to prevent her from leaving, Noah fakes a catastrophic medical emergency, claiming he is throwing up blood clots.
Typical manipulative escalation.
Exactly. And Chad steps into this chaos, not just as a sympathetic friend, but almost as a seasoned crisis negotiator.
Because Chad has transformed his own trauma into a curriculum. If we connect this to the bigger picture, he looks at Lee's situation and recognizes the exact same toxic borderline dynamics, the exact same manipulation of empathy that he just barely survived, and he uses his hard-won knowledge to guide her through the minefield.
He gives her incredibly specific, battle-tested advice, like, Lee is paralyzed by logistics. She is worried about her stuff, her property, if she leaves. Chad, the man who lost all his tools and gear to a false PFA, tells her, quote, a restraining order protects property too. He would be prohibited from taking or destroying anything. He's giving her the legal cheat codes he wishes he had.
He also addresses the psychological trap directly. Lee echoes the exact same cognitive dissonance Chad felt. She tells him she still loves Noah. Chad responds with a masterstroke of validation and boundary setting. He tells her, quote, you can love someone and not be with them for your own health.
That's so powerful.
It is. He validates her emotion. Yes, the love is real, while completely invalidating it as an excuse to endure abuse.
And then he hits her with this profound warning about Noah's erratic theatrical behavior. Chad says, quote, he's not a violent person, but he's a desperate, scared person. And that can be just as unpredictable.
Whoa.
Let that sink in. A desperate, scared person can be just as unpredictable.
Yeah, that is not something you read in a textbook.
No. That is the razor-sharp insight of a man who has stared down the barrel of a trauma bond and survived. He recognizes that an abuser losing control is the most dangerous variable in the equation. He actively coaches Lee toward calling the domestic abuse hotline, providing her with the exact same lifeline he used a year prior.
It represents the ultimate reclamation of his pain. His suffering in that Asheville motel room wasn't meaningless because it provided him with the precise psychological tools and empathy required to save his friend's life.
So the groundwork is paying off. The orange section is secure, the nervous system is regulated, the community is built. Which brings us to the final act. We see a distinct turning point arrive in the spring of 2024. Chad sends a message to Lee where he explicitly states his new baseline. He says, quote, like a switch flipped in my brain and I'm done wasting time and playing games.
And you can literally feel the energy shift in the syntax of the logs from here on out. The hesitation is gone, the cognitive dissonance has evaporated, the trauma bond is fully broken.
He takes concrete steps upward on Maslow's pyramid. He finally secures a safe, stable, permanent living situation. A roommate set up in a house in Wiscasset with a woman named Jen. He has his own room, he has a door that closes, he has geographical stability. And with that stability, his mind begins to flourish.
He starts engaging his higher-level cognitive functions. He actually begins teaching a new friend, Kara, how to program in Python.
Which is such a brilliant countermeasure to emotional chaos. I mean, Python is a language of absolute logic. You write the code, and it executes perfectly. There is no gaslighting in computer programming. It is pure cause and effect. It's the ultimate grounding exercise for a brain recovering from unpredictability.
Right, it's just such a stark contrast to his relationship.
And physically, he is thriving. By April of 2024, he has logged an astonishing 53 different coastal hikes. He is reclaiming his body.
But, the universe rarely allows a perfect, uninterrupted upward trajectory.
Right.
Just when his life is stabilizing, just when he feels safe, he's hit with a massive, terrifying test. And it involves his dog, Olive.
Okay, now if you read these logs from start to finish, Olive is the undisputed emotional anchor of Chad's life. Through the homelessness, the motel rooms, the van life, Olive is the one constant. He states emphatically at one point that he would live in a cardboard box under a bridge before he would ever give her up. She is his family.
Yeah. And in March 2024, Olive suffers a sudden, catastrophic medical emergency. She develops a condition called gastric dilatation volvulus, commonly known as a flipped stomach or GDV.
Oh, no.
It is a horrifying condition where the dog's stomach fills with gas and literally twists on its axis, cutting off blood supply and trapping the gas. It causes rapid tissue death and is fatal within hours if not surgically corrected.
And the detail in the logs here,
Yeah.
it gives me chills. Chad is messaging his friends from the waiting room of the emergency veterinary hospital. He explains how he caught it. He says that in the middle of the night, for absolutely no apparent reason, he woke up to get a glass of water. And because he was awake, he noticed Olive acting strangely, pacing and struggling.
He trusted his gut.
He did. He immediately recognized the distress and rushed her to emergency surgery. The vets told him point blank, if he had slept until morning, she would have been dead. He saved her life.
Think about the profound psychological symbolism of that moment. For years, Chad's intuition was systematically battered. His abuser told him his instincts were wrong. He told his therapist he couldn't trust his own judgment. His internal alarm system was broken. But in the middle of the night, his subconscious, his healed intuition woke him up.
He listened to the alarm.
He listened to the alarm, and by trusting his own judgment, he saved the most precious thing in his life. Olive represents Chad's capacity to protect and nurture. After failing to protect himself for so long and then spending a year painstakingly learning how to build boundaries, saving his dog is the undeniable reclamation of his power as a guardian.
He is no longer the confused victim hiding in the Asheville motel, taking the blame. He is the protector. He is the man who takes action. It is a triumphant moment. But the archive doesn't end there. There's a final curveball. The logs jump us forward 2 years to March of 2026.
Yes. Chad reconnects with an old friend named Rebecca. They are catching up after a long period of silence. And in the course of the conversation, Chad reveals that shortly after they last spoke, he was diagnosed with a severe, life-altering medical condition, trigeminal neuralgia.
For those who are unfamiliar, trigeminal neuralgia is a chronic pain condition that affects the trigeminal nerve, which carries sensation from your face to your brain. It is caused by the degradation of the myelin sheath around the nerve. It causes excruciating, sudden, electric shock-like facial and tooth pain. It is notoriously nicknamed the suicide disease because it is considered one of the most painful conditions known to modern medicine.
It's devastating.
And Chad casually drops the bomb to Rebecca that this diagnosis, quote, changed my life and ended my career. I have to stop here and push back on the narrative. Because as a reader, getting to the end of this incredible journey and reading that diagnosis, it feels like a gut punch.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
feels incredibly unfair.
Right.
This man spends years doing the agonizing, grueling psychological work to break an abusive trauma bond. He rebuilds his mind, he secures his housing, he saves his dog's life, he finds peace, and then his physical body just arbitrarily breaks down and takes his career with it. How can we possibly view that as the end of a healing journey? It sounds like a tragedy.
Well, it's an entirely natural human reaction to feel the injustice of it. It is unfair. But if you look closely at the syntax, the tone, and the context of the logs from 2026, you will see exactly why this isn't a tragedy. It is, in fact, the ultimate proof of his healing.
Walk me through that. How
Yeah.
is losing your career to chronic pain proof of healing?
Look at how he communicates the news. When he tells Rebecca about losing his career to agonizing physical pain, he isn't spiraling, he isn't desperate, he isn't asking what TFF is wrong with me. He is calm, he is objective.
Okay.
And more importantly, when Rebecca reveals in the same chat that she is also dealing with a severe medical adjustment and a new disability, Chad doesn't make it a competition of suffering. He immediately pivots to deep empathy for her. He sends her a heart emoji. He validates her struggle. He holds space for her pain despite his own.
Okay, I see what you're saying. If this medical crisis, this sheer level of physical pain and career loss had hit him in April 2023 while he was still entangled with his abuser, it would have utterly destroyed him.
It would have been a death sentence. He would have been physically immobilized and entirely dependent on a toxic person who thrived on his vulnerability. His abuser would have used his disability as the ultimate tool of control.
But because he did the grueling work, because he secured his orange section on Maslow's hierarchy, because he built a village of safe friends like Pam and Kara and Zach, and because he learned how to regulate his own nervous system on the trails of the East Coast, he is ready.
Exactly.
He has built the emotional infrastructure required to survive life's inevitable, unfair tragedies. He doesn't need a toxic relationship to cope with his reality anymore. He can face chronic pain. He can face the loss of his career with grace, stability, and empathy for others.
It is a masterclass in post-traumatic growth. His story proves that breaking a trauma bond is not a single dramatic decision. It is thousands of tiny, exhausting, deliberate choices to choose reality over the illusion of the abuser until reality becomes a safe place to live.
What a profound journey. We started in a skeezy motel in Asheville, North Carolina, with a man completely broken by sexual assault, paralyzed by cognitive dissonance, and targeted by the gaslighting of a false legal charge. We watched him deliberately, painfully reconstruct his reality.
Step by step.
Step by step. He used Maslow's hierarchy as an architectural blueprint. He used the mountain trails of the East Coast to quiet the alarms in his amygdala. He leaned on a supportive community when he was weak, and then he became the foundational support for that community when he grew strong.
And he documented every single agonizing step of it, providing a map for anyone else trapped in the dark.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Chad's logs, I want you, the listener, to reflect on your own life. Think about your own orange section on Maslow's hierarchy. We live in a culture obsessed with self-actualization with the top of the pyramid. But when your life gets chaotic, when the stress hits, what are your foundational baseline needs? What is the safety, the shelter? Who are the safe people that you need to secure first before you try to fix everything else?
Because if that foundation isn't secure, the rest of the pyramid will eventually collapse under the weight of the storm.
Exactly. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over today. A thought about how we view trauma and vulnerability as a society. Chad saved himself, ultimately, through radical transparency with his friends. He rejected the masculine expectation of stoic suffering. He said, "I need a hug."
Which is huge.
It forces us to ask how many people are currently trapped in the bottom sections of Maslow's pyramid simply because society tells them, especially men, that their trauma is something to be ashamed of.
Right. How many trauma bonds remain unbroken because the victim is too embarrassed to tell their friends what is really happening behind closed doors?
What would happen if we all treated vulnerability not as a weakness, but as a public utility? Chad's story, especially that 2026 medical diagnosis, proves a hard, unavoidable truth. True healing from abuse or from any trauma doesn't mean you earn a magical shield that prevents you from ever facing hardship again. Life is still going to throw devastating curveballs. The medical diagnoses, the lost careers, the absolute unfairness of the universe. The storms do not stop coming.
They never do.
But true healing simply means that when the next storm hits, you finally have a safe house to weather it in. And, with absolute certainty that you built that house yourself. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Keep seeking those aha moments in your own lives. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.